Hi, Connor here for Avid Visions, and today I'm going to be unboxing the Nikon 35mm f1.8 and doing a lens review. I've been using this lens for the past week, and I am just going to unbox it to show you how it's packaged and just show you what it comes with. So as soon as we open the box right here, these are some little goodies that I'll go over in a second. So we'll put these aside for now. And now, looking inside the box, you'll see the typical Nikon manual. Not much of a surprise there. So we're going to put that aside. And then inside the box itself, you have this nice little cardboard contraption to keep the lens securely in place. You slide these two tabs up, and the lens is wrapped and in here. You can just get it out. Now, I'll go over some of the goodies first, and then talk about the lens a little bit. So, packaged with this lens is Nikon's lens hood, which is the HB46, if you can see that, HB46. And also, you get a case for the lens, which I haven't opened yet. I don't personally use these because the lens is always on my camera and my bag, but it's always good for some storage, and it's a nice, typical Nikon case. Lens itself comes with Nikon caps. They're normal pinch caps, like that. And I've added the UV filter on. That's not with the lens. And the new Nikon rear lens cap. This is different from ones from even a few months ago, which is nice. While we're here, I'll talk to you a little bit about the lens. So, if you can see, there's some details here. It's a DX lens, meaning that it's for digital crop sensor cameras only. So if you have an old film camera, even though the lens will mount on the camera, it won't cover the full frame, and this goes for full frame cameras as well. The glass isn't wide enough for the sensor to read, so don't use this on a full frame camera. There's a silent wave motor for SWM, and this lens, while we're talking about focusing motors, will focus on all Nikon cameras, including the D40 and D60. Because it is an AFS lens, as you can see there. Some other information about the lens. It is a G lens, which means gelded. So you'll notice there's no aperture ring right here. So that's another reason why you couldn't use this on, say, an old film camera. You can't manually change the aperture. It's all got to be done on camera, which is a cost-saving measure, and it also makes the lens lighter. This is a very light lens, which is nice. Now right here we have the manual automatic to manual focusing switch. So right now it's in manual automatic, which means if I'm on my camera I can automatically focus, but I can also manually override and change the focus by just moving the lens ring. And you'll notice I'm just keeping on spinning and spinning and spinning. There's no hard stop at infinity or its closest focusing distance of 0.98 feet. And there's also no focusing scale, which is sort of unfortunate because I like that. Especially since the old Nikon 35 f2 had one of those, and the 50mm D series has one of those too. So, anyway, some other things this lens has. It has a little rear gasket right here. You can see there's this little rubber ring that I'm pushing on right now, and that's a dust gasket, so it'll stop dust from getting in your camera, and it makes your camera more weather sealed if you have a higher end Nikon that's already weather sealed. So that's nice for protecting your camera. And I should have shown you when the lens cap was off, but it's a metal rear mount, so this thing is built to last. The build quality is actually pretty good for one of Nikon's cheaper lenses, but it certainly is not up to par with the 50mm f1.8 D series lens. This is definitely more plasticky, but it's still a very nicely built lens. The focusing ring, though, isn't the smoothest. You can probably hear it makes some noise, but no big problem. Typical Nikon finish. It looks just like the D60. Okay, I'm going to change the angle here and show you this lens compared to another lens. Okay, now I'm going to show you the size of this lens. It's actually a pretty small lens. Let's focus a little bit closer. So this is the 35mm f1.8 G series, and this is the 50mm f1.8 D series. So you'll notice there's a pretty significant size difference actually. This lens is both wider and it's a bit taller as well. Both of these lenses, however, have the nice f1.8 aperture, and both of them accept a filter thread of 52mm. Now, I'm comparing these lenses because these are both considered standard lenses. The 50mm is the standard focal length on a film camera or full frame camera, and the 35mm focal length on a crop sensor camera, which is what the lens is made for. Again, DX only used for crop sensor. On the Nikon crop factor, a 35mm lens becomes roughly 52.5 millimeter lens. So these are very comparable focal lengths when this is used on a film camera or a full sensor camera, and this is used on a crop sensor. So that's just an interesting note. This is considered a standard lens on cameras. So there are some trade-offs you should know about for that. I'm just going to put some caps back on these things. When you have a longer focal length, you have a shallower depth of field. So even though on a crop sensor camera like this D60, this 35mm lens is the equivalent focal length of the 50mm. That is, if you take a picture with this lens on this camera, and then you take the exact same picture with this 50mm lens on a film camera, although the frame will be the same, this will have a shallower, or a thicker depth of field. The 50mm lens on the film camera will have the shallower depth of field because it's a larger focal length. So this can be good or bad. I mean, if you're taking portraits with this lens, then you're going to have more in focus of the person, which can be nice, so you can use f1.8 more often. But the bokeh suffers because of this. The bokeh is really not all that pleasant. I'll show you a few sample shots in a second, but I honestly don't think that the bokeh of this lens can compete with the bokeh of the 50mm f1.8. And again, part of that is because we're comparing two different focal lengths, but also this lens's bokeh is just not one of Nikon's best. It's not terrible, but every once in a while you get a shot where the autofocus bits are just not acceptable and really quite distracting, which is unfortunate. However, like I said, this lens can be used on even entry-level cameras like the D60, which is important because this is a real entry-level lens. And it's really good as far as like sharpness and image quality all throughout the frame. There is some fall-off at the lower apertures, but that quickly disappears as you step up, or step the aperture down. And you reach peak sharpness at about 5.6 on this lens, f5.6. However, all the way up from f2.2 or so to 5.6, you're not gaining that much. So even when you're pretty wide open, this lens is very, very sharp, which is a sign of a well-built lens. You're going to start to lose image quality after you stop your aperture down above f of 8, however. But this lens is more for wide open shooting anyway. Now I'm going to show you some sample shots with the lens that I've taken on my D300. This is a shot I just took on the table to show you the quality of the bokeh. I'm focused at about 18 inches away from the subject, so it's pretty close, and you see the bokeh still isn't that amazing. Now this is a shot taken on the 35mm lens. I'm going to compare it to the same shot on a tripod from the 50mm lens. As you can see, it's much less zoomed in, so this might make the difference if you want to own both. Overall, I'm going to give the lens an 8 out of 10. It has some decent build quality and great value for money. It's a really good lens for beginners too. The focal length is very handy and helps you work on your composition, and the wide aperture is great for low lighting photography. Thanks for watching. This is Connor for Avid Visions. See ya.